For me, I think the real turning point was maybe when I was 11 or so. I lived in New Jersey, and I didn't know that many other people who were into the things that I was into. And suddenly, I was able to meet other kids and talk to them about music and politics and sort of form our identities together. And I don't think I even knew at the time how this is not a thing that was possible at any point in history before.
I was at a friend's place and he showed me the modem went with its chirping characteristic sound. And instead of just connecting to a computer, he was connected to a gateway computer, giving him the possibility to access other computers. This just blew my mind.
And the simple fact that they could have, forums or blog discussions with people across the world, I thought that it was really magic.
I think what you're seeing now is both, different levels, both from the governments and the companies, but also from the individual users, a growing awareness that, it may be not such a free space after all.
US intelligence confirms it's collecting the private messages of internet users.
9 major internet companies, they include Google, Facebook, Yahoo, Microsoft, Skype, YouTube, Apple, AOL, and Paltalk, have been used by the FBI and the National Security Agency to monitor photos, videos, emails, audio, and all other sorts of information, tracking a sweeping scope of individuals' online activity.
After the first dot-com bust, some of the internet companies then there'd been this promise that the internet would be the kind of new economy, and they had thought that people subscribing to services would actually be the way they would make money. But as we found out, nobody was willing to do that, and people really wanted to visit websites and have services online for free. After that, a couple of organizations started experimenting with the idea of using the data that they had on their users and realizing that this was quite valuable in the context of advertising. And that's kind of how it started. It's what some people call the internet's original sin.
When 9/11 happened, they took the programs that I had helped do and put together and used them to spy on everybody on the planet, including all US citizens first. We were the first ones who they adopted bulk acquisition and bulk collection on. That was US citizens. They do it in the easiest way they can, which means if companies have assembled information about their customers, then that's a readily accessible set of information about a large number of people. Then the intelligence agencies will simply go there and buy it from that company or get access to their data directly.
It's a kind of surveillance that is rather invisible to the person, and that is at the crossroads of public and private actors. And that is nested in our everyday life through our everyday services, you see? So it's much more, I would say, difficult for the people to identify that they are object of surveillance.
Putting yourself, tons of personal information online using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, people don't really realize the danger when it comes to that. But people have instant benefits. It's immediate, it's granted, and it's free. So it's easy. And it's very difficult to balance something that is free, easy, enjoyable, with something that might be dangerous in a hard-to-predict future.
Was du saufen oder was?
Ja, boah. Willst du ja mal zusammen gucken, wird dir das gefällt da? Oh. Moin, danke, ich Standard. Einfach zu checken, was weißt du einfach. Detail also Filter.
gucken, weil schon um 6, halb 7 im Keller sind.
Frag, wen ich spiel dir.
Na, wähle.
Gordon hat, weil der Regie gemacht hat in Leipzig, wie man da vorgeht, weil die haben irgendwie nicht mehr viel Geld über und sollen dann irgendwie dabei haben. Und das wird wahrscheinlich irgendwie so eine Vertragssache. Jo, nee, das ist super. Jo, bis bald. Ciao.
Without a doubt, the most I'd say aggressive data collector is through the mobile phone, because we're taking it with us in the things that we do. And when this acts kind of like a tracking device, we're leaving data traces that not only indicate things like services that we're accessing, but also where we're going and what our behaviors and patterns are. What you can see very quickly is things like, when does that person often go to bed? Are they traveling? Do they call if they're traveling, do they call a partner every morning? Do they call them in the evening? Did they go out for dinner? Who are they talking to? Who are their the social graph is called, meaning the circle of people around them. And so there are different ways that people are then profiled or categorized on the basis of their behaviors. Another thing that's happening is that people, again, through their social media use, are being profiled in terms of maybe their political affiliations, their religion, their sexual orientation, these kinds of things. There's the companies that we're perhaps not surprised are collecting our data. So for example, the news website we go to, or maybe the use of Google, that kind of thing. But then there's the companies that are tracking our data that we don't see, that we don't kind of choose. So for example, when we're looking at a website for the news, there'll be lots of other what are called third-party trackers.
Those third party are present, some of them, are present nearly 100% of your navigation. This means that some company that you have not actually endorsed to be present in your navigation, you have not chosen actively, they are still looking what are you doing. And that is present on entertainment, pornography, healthcare, news.
This is what some people call the data brokering industry. Some of the most, I'd say, the growth areas there are things like online dating or websites discussing health issues, for example. The business model for the people who are providing the site is to collect your data and often sell it on, for example, in the case of health sites, to pharmaceutical companies.
Let's say you checked her out now.
At least I have some impact.
So what is she doing? Is she fine?
Let's.
Yeah, I think so. We can check. I think we posted a picture 5 minutes ago from.
And right now too.
Yeah,
that's just very.
Hallo and Maxwell.
Yeah, I'm always sending nice ones and then Kim is answering the ugly ones. I said that's nice, and Kim said no, this is nice.
Is that like emojis that you have to buy?
No, you just
download.
But why would connect my camera?
But it's not about this, it's just the possibility that if you want to value, they can do it. Like,
well, but this is technology. This is technology.
But I feel like that's why I don't care, because I think, okay, no one wants to know what I'm doing anyway. I mean,
but I think it's really interesting that everyone says I don't have anything to hide. Like, I have something to hide because I do stuff which is against the law, and I think we all do in a way.
I'm not doing anything against the law.
I don't have anything to hide. I don't have any. Well, I do actually. Yeah.
I think it's kind of a difficult question. The process people go through in, I think, justifying their use of technology in terms of this business model of, okay, I get this for free, I give over my data, and I have nothing to hide, so why do I care? And maybe it's a bit creepy, maybe it's a bit strange, maybe I get certain adverts sent to me, but it doesn't make any difference to me. And I think that means that for people like us who try to argue something different, that we should care about these things, it's quite hard to break that barrier.
Part of the reason I think this is that how quickly people are ready to volunteer that, it makes me a little suspicious, that they're like, no, I have nothing to hide, clearly. And really they're thinking, maybe I'm a little worried about this, but I don't want to be the one to say it. But think about how people who care about surveillance have been marginalized, you know? There are so many jokes about wearing the tinfoil hat and, you know, do you really believe that they're reading your emails? When I hear someone say that, I actually hear them say, I believe something quite different from this, but I don't want you to know that I do because I don't want to be the one who thinks that.
And the other problem with the nothing to fear, nothing to hide debate is that all of us do have something to hide. You know, every single adult has probably committed a criminal offence in their life. It might be something quite minor, like stealing from work, or traffic violations, but there are many activities that are criminal but not necessarily deviant. You know, the criminological literature will tell you that a lot of people offend consistently, you know, and it's in, you know, the percentage of like 60% or more people will regularly commit offences. These might be minor offences. So lots of us have something to hide in that respect.
If you say you have nothing to fear because you have nothing to hide, so be happy, not worry, I say, okay, fine, turn over the keys to your car, your house, all of your passwords, all of your accounts, medical records, everything. And I'll put them into a special secure lockbox, but I'm gonna keep it, I will keep it for safekeeping. No one, and I've this is now thousands of people over the last several years in front of multiple audiences, no one was willing to turn over any of that information to me. And I'm asking them to consent.
Okay, tell me.
So basically what we would do is put a spy software on your cell phone, which is gonna look at the patterns and actually at the things you agreed or clicked OK on the terms of condition of the apps you're using.
Yeah.
This plus your browser, we would mostly look not really into the contents, but on what we call metadata, where you're going, when do you browse, to whom do you talk, and basically look a little bit like what does your digital life say about you.
Yeah. Is it like my computer and my cell phone?
Yes.
Tracked.
Yes.
Okay. You know a bit how I am, and I don't really give a shit. So, because that's what I always think. What everyone tells you, that I still think that I have not that much to hide, but you know, you will see maybe.
In a few years, there will be some serious drawbacks coming. For example, if you take the insurance industry, Facebook just released an algorithm that is able to give you some rating, some sort of credit rating, which is kind of weird when you think about it, but totally normal in terms of big data. Facebook is totally able to predict if you will pay back your loan or not.
There's usually a point at which people do care, and I think that's the question of what do they care about? So do they care because they know that the tax inspector is now using these technologies to track people? Do they care because they've got a family member who has a history of mental health issues? Do they care because they themselves don't want to be given a different, deal in terms of, now very high health insurance costs because of their lifestyle, this kind of thing?
Credit rating is totally predictable. It will happen. In a few years, your personal information, the one you're willingly putting online, on Facebook, Twitter, all this thing, will give you credit rating. And if you end up with a bad credit rating, well, you ask for it. You were the one thinking that you had nothing to hide.
I like to speak about intimacy. And if fundamental rights seem like something remote, something you may not want to care about because, you have to fill your fridge, you have to pay the rent, you have to wipe the baby's ass and whatnot, then an intimacy is not what you're willing to give up. You understand what it means. Intimacy is those spaces where you are truly yourself, either alone or with people you decide to share this intimacy with. Intimacy is when you're naked, either as a metaphor or really. It's when you can experiment with yourself, you can experiment with with new ideas, with new concepts, with new practices, without being judged by your peers. If you're in the middle of a crowd of 100 people and take a guitar and think, what would it do if I played like this, cling, clong, clong? You would never do it. If you're alone in your bedroom with that guitar, you do the cling, clang, clong, and maybe it sounds like shit. And you try again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And maybe after 1,000 times, you'll feel ready to have another person listen to it. And maybe after 10,000 times, you'll feel ready to have 100 people listen to it.
Der andere soll einen einfach mal wollen. Aber von sich aus soll der wollen. Ja, von sich aus soll der das wollen, aber so wie ich das will.
It's because you have an opportunity in your intimacy to experiment without being judged. That you can make mistakes with no cost. It's because of that you can develop your personality. This is what we are being robbed.
People don't really think of these things. I think also they don't realize that their situation may someday change. You know, today you might feel like you're not a very political person or your life is not very exciting. But what happens if suddenly, let's say you live in a rural part of the world and an oil company wants to put a pipeline through your land or something, that now suddenly you do have some things to hide. You do have an adversary.
Arguing that you don't care about privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying that you don't care about freedom of speech because you have nothing to say. But the bottom line here is, even if you're not using a given right at this precise moment, other people do. Saying that you don't care about a right because you're not using it personally is the most antisocial thing you can possibly say. What it's saying is that I don't care about other people. Now, particularly if this is being said by someone who occupies a position of privilege. You know, if you're a rich, old, white guy sitting on the very top of society, you don't care what the laws are, you don't care what the rights are, because society is ordered to protect your interest. It's the minorities who always face the greatest risk.
I saw my mom and my grandmother go through some really tough experiences. And I, became aware that discrimination and violence against women and girls wasn't just happening in my family or community. And I decided that I wanted to work on these issues. And it wouldn't be unusual for a human rights researcher to become a target even of US surveillance. I'm someone who has interviewed not only Somalis and Egyptians, but also Iraqis, Afghanis, Yemenis. So, the people that I interview typically are coming from populations of extreme political interest to my own country, to the US. In context even of the war on terror. And I do think that it's, not only plausible but probable that I became a target of US intelligence interest, not just because I'm a human rights researcher, but after doing this research with Somali girls and uncovering instances where girls named Americans and Saudis as so-called clients of sex-trafficked refugee girls in Djibouti.
What we see in different countries around the world is the political situation and the sort of political agenda changing quickly. So something that's okay now to talk about might not be okay in 3 years' time.
If you combine a drastic and very disruptive technological progress and this soon-to-come political disruption, you will end up in a short time period in something so different that any kind of prospective effort is really, really difficult to make.
So I'm gonna plug in the USB stick and we can have a look at what data we have. So we have different...
X, all logs.
Exactly. So all logs, that's data from his iPhone.
And from the MacBook.
And from the MacBook. And from the MacBook, we have his browser history. So from his laptop. And from the iPhone, we have lots of different data sources.
Ah.
So we have GPS data, we have an overview of all the apps he has installed, we have his browser history from his iPhone. We know who he called, who's in his address book. We have his Facebook messages, SMS, Skype messages, WhatsApp messages.
Damn.
Yeah, so we can
I feel bad.
kind of see what apps he used. So I'm a data analyst, which means I work with databases and I analyze data to usually find fraud or suspicions of fraud in the data. And I'm going to apply my skills here to, first of all, to identify patterns in the data, to see who Mr. X is, what he does regularly, but also to find things that are unusual in the data. My goal is to correlate the different data sources to see whether there are any patterns between the different data sources.
I was dedicated to do privacy analysis on the mainstream website. So understand which are the third-party trackers present in the website. I will try to apply this analysis also to the browsing history of Mr. X.
The point is, it's collecting data on that scale on everybody in a country presents the opportunity for the government to go really bad. They just don't understand that. Now, people in Germany who have experience with totalitarian states like the Stasi and the Gestapo and SS, they have living memory of what it means to have that kind of information in a central repository for central government to use. And it's only a matter of whether or not the government is favorable to democratic principles or not, as to whether or not they become totalitarian or not.
Mein Plan war, mit der Demonstration mitzulaufen bis zum Ende, dort wo das Politbüro auf einer Tribüne stand. Auf meinem Transparent stand der Satz: Jeder Bürger der DDR hat das Recht, seine Meinung frei und öffentlich zu äußern.
Hier an dieser Laterne hatten sie mich eingeholt und haben mich an den Armen gepackt und ich sollte abgeführt werden. Dann haben sie mich aber gepackt und weggeschleift. Hier diesen ganzen Weg habe ich mich schleifen lassen. Der Pelzmantel meiner Mutter war danach hinüber. Und hier stand ein großer Lastwagen, ohne Plane, also ein Freier. Und hier bin ich dann kontrolliert worden. Da haben sie dann auch mein Transparent gefunden, was ich im Rucksack noch hatte. Und und dann sollte ich auf den Lastwagen steigen.
The Minister of State Security always said, we have to know who is who. That was his always repeated sentence. That's the main question in our work.
I spent many, many years listening in on East German communications. And so the motto was to know everything. And at NSA, the mantra under Keith Alexander, director of NSA, Keith Alexander, was to collect it all. Well, part of what's mean is collect it all to know it all. And if you know it all, then guess what?
Who is who? That means who is thinking what. This was very important because the Stasi wanted to influence people and to stop political activities before they started.
Diese Oppositionenbewegung der 80er Jahre begann in der Hochzeit des Kalten Krieges, als Atomwaffen in Deutschland stationiert wurden. Also wurde ich dann Mitbegründerin des ersten Friedenskreises der DDR, des Friedenskreises Pankow, gegen die Militarisierung des Lebens in der DDR, gegen die Stationierung von Atomraketen, gegen Militärunterricht in den Schulen. Ich habe ja dann 1982 auch einen der ersten privaten, sozusagen Umweltkreise gegründet, der sich immer in meiner Wohnung traf. Und später dann ab 1984 kamen dann auch Menschenrechtskreise dazu, also Kreise, die die Menschenrechtsverletzungen in der DDR thematisiert haben.
I was in the Stasi archives this past year, and it's quite something seeing row after row, file after file, thousands upon tens of thousands paper-based, which in itself had been the system for keeping track of all that, the system for indexing had gone through several iterations, and they were actually moving, even the Stasi were moving in the 1980s to computer-based systems.
Tonbandmitschnitt hier. Hier ist ein Tonbandmitschnitt. So sehen die dann aus. Ja? Da ist bei einer Veranstaltung heimlich ein Tonband mitgelaufen von der Staatssicherheit. Und die Staatssicherheit hat dann dieses Tonband abgehört und hat aufgeschrieben, was ich auf dieser Veranstaltung gesagt habe. Es gab aber auch Abhörprotokolle vom Telefon, weil ich für die Stasi wichtig genug war, meine Anrufe abzuhören. Also das ist hier ein Maßnahmeplan der Staatssicherheit, Plan zur Zersetzung zum OV-Virus. Virus ist der Name meiner Akte. Operativvorgang Virus. Mit dem Ziel, den Einfluss, die Aktivitäten und die Teilnehmerzahlen des Friedenskreises Pankow zurückzudrängen und die führenden Personen des Friedenskreises zu verunsichern, werden folgende Maßnahmen der Zersetzung vorzuschlagen. Das ist ungefähr ein 20. Also ich habe 20 dicke Leitsordner und dann noch ein paar kleinere Aktenteile, die man irgendwo gefunden hat. Ich hatte ja insgesamt 49 inoffizielle Mitarbeiter, die über mich berichtet haben. Im Laufe der Jahre 49, da war ich ziemlich erstaunt. Und Virus, den Namen finde ich auch interessant, ja, den die Stasi uns gegeben hat oder mir gegeben hat. Ich bin also diejenige, die zur Erkrankung des Systems führt. Ne? Fantasie hatten die Jungs schon. Ja.
Wolfgang Schmidt was looking at the NSA. He's a former lieutenant colonel in the former lieutenant colonel in the East German Stasi. So he was looking at the NSA surveillance program, and he said, to us, meaning the Stasi, this would have been a dream come true.
In Western democracies, if you're talking Germany of today, or if you're talking the United States of today, it's not a police state. But the mechanisms, the instruments of power necessary to affect that are essentially all in place. The only difference really is those in power.
And you then have to trust and depend on your leaders to be, focused on more democratic ways of life and supporting that. And you can't guarantee that. I mean, no one can. So in the United States, they say it can't happen here. Well, I'm sorry. Yes, it can.
It seems like it never sleeps. Wait, so because we have data points like every few minutes, all night for 2 days in a row. Maybe that's his lifestyle, but... Here, for example, last data point is at midnight, and then we have another one at 11 in the morning. So that would make sense. So maybe it was really just that he didn't sleep for 2 days in the beginning.
And then as I recovered with 11 hours of sleep.
Monsieur, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Il y a eu un attentat.
French MPs have approved a bill which would give intelligence services their most intrusive domestic spying abilities ever, with little judicial oversight. The move comes in the wake of the Charlie Hebdo attacks in January.
This bill will govern all of the powers available to law enforcement, the security and intelligence agencies and the armed forces to acquire the content of communications or communications data.
Dies ist ein guter Tag für die Sicherheit und die Freiheit der Bürgerinnen und Bürger Deutschlands. Es ist ein schlechter Tag für die großen Verbrecher aller Art.
The net effect is if you are a law-abiding citizen of this country, going about your business and your personal life, you have nothing to fear.
There are many narratives. One is the nothing to fear, nothing to hide argument. The other one that's commonly articulated is that there is a balance between security and liberty, or sometimes that's more narrowly defined as a balance between security and privacy. It's an extremely problematic way of conceptualising these things for several reasons. Benjamin Franklin said something along the lines that people who are willing to give up their liberty for security will lose both, and they deserve neither. And what I take from that is that there's not a simple balancing. These aren't things you can easily quantify and measure against each other.
I would say very simply, bulk surveillance has been a direct and absolute continuing failure. I mean, it has stopped. They justified by the terrorist groups and stopping terrorism as the means of doing it, the reason why they have to do it. But in fact, it has failed in every turn. Every attack has happened, and they've not been able to stop it by bulk collection.
Each time you have a terrorist attack somewhere in the world, you hear right after, oh, see, we need more security, we need more securitarian law, we need more power to the government agencies and the such.
It's more than 20 years I am in data protection, but I still am a member of the judiciary with a background on organized crime, anti-mafia legislation, and it was me drafting the so-called Italian Patriot Act. So no need to persuade me that at certain stages interferences are essential and even invasive activities by the state. But the efficiency of criminal investigation by police and judicial offices should build on selective sources.
What works is difficult, is infiltrating the networks, is surveilling the individuals, is blending into the mass, is for agents to learn languages and risk their lives. And the agents don't want that. They got those big computer systems where they can watch the whole world. Well, guess what? It doesn't prevent terrorism.
That's true in Paris, that's true in Copenhagen, that's true in London, that's true in New York and in Boston and Texas and California. All those attacks, they've never been stopped, yet the people they knew that did it, they knew about them and knew they were potential terrorists. But they didn't do anything about it, and the reason is because of this bulk acquisition. They have to wade through all this bulk data to try to assess them and what they're doing as a threat. That means the consequence of that is people have to die first. Then you go look at the people who did that, and then you focus on them, and then you go after anybody who was associated with them. A focused, targeted approach will give them the opportunity to stop people from dying. That's what they need to do.